Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sir Hunt on X on this Monday, the 29th of September, 2025, as I'm coming to you live from a playoff festival atmosphere here in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. And you know what happened here in Cincinnati last night? I will touch on that in the baseball segment here in a little bit. Playoff atmosphere, it's a fun time to be supporting the Cincinnati Reds. I'll touch on their how they got to that point and what are their chances against the Dodgers here in a little bit. Of course, historical moments in the world of boxing, especially when it crowned the middleweight division. I'll be deep into the historical aspect of that, especially one of the pure face-first brawls that took place 80 years ago. But as usual, on the Monday after the NFL Sunday, I give my NFL recap, give some opinions before I divulge into the other sports and among many other categories. Lots of newbies here tonight, lots of new followers on all the platforms. Brief introduction of what I do, because this is the new way of doing things as opposed to 80 million word posts like you used to do in newspapers that no one's going to read. This is my preferred method of giving my opinions. I touch on various sports. The boxing is more the historical aspect as opposed to the present due to the political cartooning that's going on that I refuse to partake in, especially the super fight that took place a few weeks ago in Las Vegas, which was just a cartoon as opposed to a super fight. But that's what I do. All sports topics from the past to the present, put them together, and we'll see how you can make a good future out of it. Now I'm going to get right down to it. The week 4 is now complete. Lots to talk about. I'm going to break each game piece by piece as I usually do. I'm going to go through this a little quicker than I usually do because I have lots to get to in terms of the NFL topics because there are lots to talk about. We'll start with what took place in New York yesterday. A bit of a stunner. It was the New York Giants, led by Jackson Dart, beating the previously unbeaten Los Angeles Chargers. Story of this one is Jackson Dart outplayed Justin Herbert. I mean, who could not see that coming? But Jackson Dart made the plays that's going to make you become a fan of his. I mean, there's a lot of questions whether he was worthy of the pick the Giants took him as, but he made the most of it and basically took advantage of the opportunity and got us the stunning win over the Los Angeles Chargers. The sad story, of course, on that one is the ACL tear of Malik Neighbors sort of dampens it a little bit. But when you talk about the Giants' defensive front, I mean, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Abdul Carter, who I call the best player pound for pound in the 2025 NFL draft, they wreaked havoc on Justin Herbert and that Chargers offensive line and did damage. I mean, Dexter Lawrence nearly had a pick 6 out of it. And when you talk about the defensive front, that was their intention. We talk about signing Burns from Carolina, getting Dexter Lawrence from Dallas, and, of course, drafting Abdul Carter out of Penn State. And that's what they did yesterday. Of course, it didn't help for the Chargers that they already lost Rashawn Slater for the year with the patella injury to his foot. And now they lost Joe Alt for quite a while with a high ankle sprain. And, of course, Mekhi Becton apparently was knocked out of that game with a concussion. So that offensive line has fallen on tough times a little bit. And you already lost Najee Harris for the year with a torn ACL. Sad, rough situation for LA, who got off to a great 3-0 start, beating each of the AFC West teams, the Chiefs, the Raiders, and the Broncos. Looked like they had the early leg up. But now everything's changed. And Justin Herbert, I said the best quarterback not named Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, or Lamar Jackson, showed why there are people that still don't trust him because it was like a carbon copy of how he played in the AFC divisional round last season in Houston. And we saw what happened in that playoff game. It was a solid road win, solid home win for the Giants. Jackson Dart got the fans on his side cheering for him. And basically, the Giants offensive line did a heck of a job limiting the Chargers defense to only 2 sacks. Solid home win for the Giants, shocking the previously unbeaten LA Chargers. Now I'm going to run quick to the early slate. It was the Patriots over the Panthers. Nothing more needs to be said. Basically, 2 punt returns for Marcus Jones. Drake May was as good as you could possibly be. And the Patriots are now 2-2. Big divisional tilt in Buffalo this coming Sunday against the Bills. We're going to find out just how good they are because we saw what Buffalo did to the Saints. A lot closer than expected, but the Saints don't have anything to play for. Likely a trap game for the Bills, given their big division game coming up Sunday against New England. And it was a solid win for Buffalo. I mean, anyone in this NFL is, you can get it, you take it. Josh Allen wasn't necessarily the greatest, but James Cook did the heavy lifting with 135 yards. Saints will probably find a way to win a game or two down the line, but not anytime soon. That roster is just a mess. But Buffalo, New England, big one coming up Sunday. We're going to find out just how good New England is going to be. And it was the Lions just basically gradually pounding the Browns down to submission. Game was I expected to be. The Browns defense is legit. I mean, Myles Garrett, Mason Graham on that front line. That secondary with Denzel Ward and Grant Delpit is as good as any secondary, even Greg Newsome. But offensively, yeah, you can only do so much. And because that offense gave you next to nothing, that defense started to slowly crack. And the Lions offense, which I've said before, can be one of the bigger juggernauts, showed as it gradually wore down and beat Cleveland route to a decisive win. Browns defense played as well as you could possibly play, all things considered. But when you offer nothing on offense, you can expect that to be the result. Solid win for the Detroit Lions on their home field. And it was Houston over Tennessee. Nothing really needs to be said. Of course, it was announced earlier today that the Browns traded Cam Robinson. The Browns acquired Cam Robinson from Houston in exchange for a pick swap because the Cleveland offensive line was just decimated, especially with the season-ending injury to DeJuan Jones. But in terms of Houston, maybe they found their new running back in Woody Marks. 119 total yards and 2 touchdowns. We know the offseason was it going to be Joe Mixon or Nick Chubb. Maybe it's Woody Marks. And the defense just put the clamps on Cam Ward in that offense in Tennessee, who was just a mess. And I'd be surprised if Brian Callahan lasts through the season, because it's just a nightmare going on in Tennessee. And Cam Ward deserves a lot better than that. Of course, it was the overseas game, Pittsburgh over Minnesota. The ending of this game was odd and weird. I mean, Pittsburgh had a chance to put it away. Instead, they took a delay a game and go for a punt. And Minnesota, weirdly, even with a chance to tie it up, couldn't make muster the place. Jordan Addison had the perfect way to burn the Steelers for the long touchdown, ran out of energy. The ending of this game was a case of which coach would mismanage it more. And that's what happened down the stretch of this game. But the real storyline here is the Pittsburgh defense just beat up the Minnesota offensive front and Carson Wentz. They're 3-1. Aaron Rodgers played one of his better games he could play at this stage of his career. Give him that. DK Metcalf burnt the Minnesota defense for a 80-plus yarder, which maybe in hindsight, that was really the difference. Pittsburgh's 3-1. They're scrapping for victories, so you have to give them that. Minnesota, might be time to go back to the drawing board, but you have to go. You have Cleveland, when you go from Dublin to London, and we'll see where that one goes. Minnesota, with all their injuries right now, chances of the playoffs are 50-50 at best at the moment. And it was Atlanta over Washington. Bijan Robinson all over the place. Thank you for the fantasy points. Michael Penix Jr. looking a lot better this week than he did last week against Carolina. Marcus Mariota did the best that they could on offense, but the defense had no answers for Penix Jr. and Bijan Robinson. Expect Jaden Daniels to come back soon to ride the ship a little bit. And the game of the early day was Philadelphia over Tampa. Philadelphia did everything they could to give it away to Tampa, but Tampa couldn't capitalize. The red zone interception by Baker Mayfield was basically the icing on the cake. I mean, if you have red zone turnovers in the NFL as it is, you're asking for an L. And that's what happened when Baker Mayfield threw that red zone interception as they were driving to try and tie in the game. You're not going to win games with red zone turnovers. You're not going to win games with red zone field goals unless it's the final play of the game. Red zone efficiency, getting touchdowns is a must in today's NFL. And if you can't get touchdowns and you're settling for field goals or unable to convert inside the goal line, you're asking for an L. And when you have turnovers in the red zone, like the interception Baker Mayfield threw, you're begging for an L, and they got it. Philly is 4-0. Great. They haven't played all that great. I mean, there's talk about whether A.J. Brown has lost it or can Saquon Barkley get to 1,000 yards again. I'll touch on that on my overreaction segment here in a second. And to the late game slate, Jacksonville over San Francisco. The 87-yard return for Parker Washington was basically the difference. Story here was a trash talking between Liam Cohen of Jacksonville and Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator for San Francisco. Lots of mouthing going on. Don't know what that's all about. But Jacksonville gets a road win. They're 3-1. Still questions that need to be answered when it comes to Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. Because once again, they had chances to connect and they couldn't. But they got the W simply because we turned the ball over 4 times like San Fran did. You're begging for a loss, and they got it. And it was the Bears over the Raiders. Another week of special teams, field goal blocking taken over again. The block as the game-winning field goal was taking place by the Bears. Caleb Williams playing much better. I mean, still questions about him, but he's played better under Ben Johnson. Made clutch plays, including the game-winning touchdown with a couple minutes left. Raiders, it's going to be another long season, finding ways to lose games, especially when we talk about losing games on a field goal block. And the special teams play in the NFL this season has been absolutely crazy. I'll touch on that here in a second. It was a Colts over losing to the Rams. Puka Nacua finally found the end zone. Matthew Stafford looking healthier and better. I said if he's healthy, that team is going to go places. Colts played well, but basically the defense just gave up big play after big play. Actually, one time they gave up a big play with only 10 men on the field. That should tell you how bad the Colts defense was. You know, offensively they look good. Adonai Mitchell burned the tape. That was it just was embarrassingly bad. Just burned the tape. We saw what happened. Just burn the tape and just move on. But LA, big win, big NFC West tilt. Thursday when they play San Francisco, going to be a dandy. And the Sunday night game was of course Green Bay and Dallas, ending up in a tie. This feels like a loss for Green Bay because you had this game under control, and your defense just did something you're not supposed to do. You turned Dak Prescott into a prime Dan Marino. And if you're Green Bay, you're embarrassing. If you let Dak Prescott do that, you're an embarrassment. Plain and simple. But you had the game under control, and you couldn't finish it. And you mismanaged. You almost couldn't get the game-tying kickoff in overtime. I mean, you mismanaged that game bad on the offensive front. And that defense, when you let Dak Prescott shred you, you have problems. I mean, we're not talking about Patrick Mahomes. We're not talking about Josh Allen. We're talking about Dak Prescott. And you let Dak Prescott burn you, then you have problems. I expect the Packers to ride this ship and get this thing back together. But also that offensive line, it's time to step up. I mean, you almost got Jordan Love killed last night. And the defensive, the drive, we talk about Josh Jacobs and Romeo Dobbs. A big game for Dobbs, for 157 yards. That was where you found a way to manage. But if you're Dallas, I mean, this is going to be what you expect every game. Offense is good enough to score points, but your defense couldn't stop a group of statues to save your lives. That's what I expect to be moving forward. And of course, the capper, and this one is what I'm having a lot to talk about. We know what happened yesterday in Kansas, where the Ravens just got punked. Might be time for a gut check when it comes to the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, I think we were going to beat Kansas anyways. I thought Kansas found something in that Giants game and it carried over. But you got punked from start to finish. I mean, you were already banged up as it was. You lost guys. So there's a whole Lamar Jackson fiasco. I'm not even going to get into it because there's a lot of overreaction from a bunch of idiots, especially in Cincinnati and Buffalo. But you're supposed to have this talented team. I mean, just on paper, you're supposed to have the most talented team on paper. You've had 4 games. Your calling card, the history of your franchise has been your defense. In 3 of the 4 games, you've given up at least 37 points. And not to mention, there was a game in Buffalo in the opener where you had that game under control, and you got dog walked after you guys decided to punt and just gift wrap the game to the Buffalo Bills on a silver platter. It's gut check time right now in Baltimore after week 4. You guys going to actually do something, or are you just going to sit there and just let things just ride out and see where it gets you? Because this was supposed to be the year, at least perception-wise, quote, perception-wise, you were supposed to be a serious challenger to Kansas City, the AFC. This was supposed to be, on paper, the AFC Championship game preview, because all the experts had this as the AFC Championship. 3 of the 4 games, your defense has been dog-walked. I mean, dog-walked. And your biggest lockout, maybe you're not going to play any more explosive offenses like Buffalo or Detroit or Kansas City. But it's a gut check time for that defense. We're going to find out just how good they can be. I mean, they're the bottom across the board, and it's embarrassingly bad. For that roster and that talent to be that embarrassingly bad, somebody has to take a fall, and somebody has to accept accountability. And right now, if you're John Harbaugh, it falls on your shoulders, not having this team prepped up the way they should be. Yes, you lost Marlon Humphrey, you lost Roquan Smith, you already lost Madubuike for the season, unfortunately, which everybody knows that was probably going to be the case. The Lamar Jackson situation, who knows? Nate Wiggins was in a sling. It's gut check time. We're about to see how good you guys can be. Can you right the ship and turn it around? It's doable. I still think you're going to win the AFC North because, the 2 Ohio teams are the 2 Ohio teams, and there's still questions about Pittsburgh. But what does it mean at the end of the day? You weren't putting this team together just to win division titles. You're supposed to be making a deep playoff run. It looks like you're begging for an early out at this rate again. So that's the Baltimore angle. Now from the Kansas angle. I told everyone, and I'll say this again, they're the team to beat until you play them in the postseason and knock them out. Plain and simple. Until someone knocks them out of the postseason, they're the team to beat. Even when they lost to the Chargers, the first 2 games to the Chargers and Eagles, they were still the team to beat. Why? They still have the foundation, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. As long as they're there, they're going to be in it. I mean, they got Xavier Worthy back. They're going to get Rashid Rice back. They have to figure out their running game, obviously. But when you talk about this particular team, been there, done that, championship DNA, it showed in New York. It showed again yesterday. And moving forward, I expect it to show, and I expect them to challenge for the top seed of the AFC again because they have the foundation. They have the DNA. They know what it takes to win, and I expect them to be there in the end. They're probably going to be the favorites to come out of the AFC again. They were my pick to represent the AFC before the season started, and I expect that to continue. I mean, until someone confronts them in the postseason and knocks them out, they're the team to beat. And nobody's going to be the team to beat until they play Kansas and knock them out. They showed it again yesterday, that championship DNA medal, the core of that roster. And I expect them to make the run. They're going to win the AFC West. I mean, I know they got off to the slow start and the Chargers looked good coming out of the gates. But I expect that to change. I expect Kansas to start rolling. They're going to get Rashid Rice back. I expect them at some point to do something about their running game because they need a running back. And that's where I expect Kansas to once again to start rolling. Shout out Zach Peters. Shout out Brenda Baker. Hope you two are doing well in your parts of town. Now I get to the overreaction part because we know it's Monday and it's overreaction. No, Baltimore's not going to miss the playoffs. As they're still going to win the division. Their biggest lockout is the Cincinnati and Cleveland are Cincinnati and Cleveland. And there's still questions about Pittsburgh. They're going to be fine. But when is winning division not going to be good enough? And at some point, the Ravens Nation probably starts to sense it also. When will there be accountability? Because this talented roster should be at least competing getting 11 to 12 wins, at least making a deep run of some sorts. You've had one AFC title game appearance, and that was 2 years ago. And we saw what happened last year in Buffalo. They're still going to make the playoffs. I mean, the rest of their schedule starts to get a little lighter. They have too much talent to miss it. But what does it mean at the end of the day? Are you good enough to compete with Buffalo or Kansas? That's what we're going to find out. Kansas is still the team to beat. As I said minutes ago, everyone needs to stop it until you knock them out in the postseason. They're the team to beat. The Eagles are the team to beat in the NFC. I don't want to hear about the problems with A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley. They'll figure it out. The reason why Saquon Barkley is off to the slow start is because they're probably loading the box, which I expected as the season started, given that he had the 2,000-yard season. But he's too good of a running back not to figure it out. He'll eventually figure it out. And right now, Jackson Dart is the best rookie quarterback in the NFL. Keyword, right now. He showed what he can do. That might change from down the line, but right now, he's the best rookie quarterback in the NFL. The Packers will be fine. Everybody's jumping off the ledge with them. Chances are Minnesota may miss the playoffs if that offensive line continues to get shredded with injuries. But we're in week 4. Can everyone please calm down? I mean, a couple of the teams are tinkering on the edge. And a couple of teams are probably playing in over their heads. But let's settle down a little bit. No, I'm not ready to anoint anything with Jacksonville because I know the Jaguar fan base is starting to talk division title over there. Let's see what they do. If that offense can figure it out. If they can figure it out, then we can talk. They're lucky they're 3-1 at this point. Actually, you could probably argue they should have been 4-0 after the meltdown in Cincinnati when Trevor Lawrence threw 3 intentional interceptions. I'll get more NFL overreaction as the season goes on. Now back to the overtime game with Green Bay and Dallas. All you guys yapped about overtime rules, and this is what you can expect. Now you guys are still yapping about overtime rules. What do you want? Shut up and let the players play. If you can't win a game in 60 minutes, that's what you can ask for. The Green Bay Packers had that game wrapped, and they should be happy they got a tie. Because that defense just collapsed like none other. I mean, you let Dak Prescott burn you. Not Patrick Mahomes, not Josh Allen, not Matthew Stafford, not Jared Goff. Dak Prescott. You let Dak Prescott burn you. Explain that. And you almost mismanaged that overtime game, the overtime period, excuse me. Luckily, there was 1 second left for you to kick the game-tying field goal. That is something that's a bit of a head-scratcher. The fact that Green Bay escaped with a tie it feels like more of in a way, a bullet dodge than anything else. But when it comes to the overtime rules, can we just let the things play out? I do agree on one thing. That should have been 15 minutes instead of 10, but it doesn't get you anywhere. If you can't beat a team in 60 minutes, what does it say about you at the end of the day? If you need an overtime to beat a team or escape with a tie, what does it say about you at the end of the day? That's what it comes down to. And what is the deal with special teams over the last couple of weeks? Punt blocks for touchdowns, blocked field goals. Actually, I think two of them have been returned for touchdowns last week. Punt return for touchdowns. I think a couple long kick returns. I think one game somebody had 2 60-yarders. That's part of what makes the NFL all football a beauty. I mean, we see the same thing in college. The fact that's happened on this level in the NFL just makes it fun to watch, and that's what it is. I mean, offense wins games, defense wins championships. You blow your hyperbole. Maybe time to find some hyperbole for special teams because it's crazy what I saw from last week going into yesterday with all the punt blocks, all the field goal blocks, punt returns for touchdowns, punt block return for touchdown, as in the Philly-Tampa game. That's what we had. And this week is this weekend when it comes to special teams has been all over the place. I expect it to continue. I mean, the Bears won it on a blocked field goal. I mean, you don't even see 3 blocked field goals in an entire season between all the 32 teams. We've probably seen at least 10 in 2 weeks. And a few games where we have block punts, you probably don't see one or two punt blocks. an entire season between all 32 teams. You've probably seen at least 4 or 5 already. It's just wild, but it's also exciting. Finding ways to win games, finding ways to score, I guess, but you got to tip your hat off to all the special teams play that's going on in the NFL. So that'll conclude my NFL segment. Now I'm going to divulge into baseball real quick, especially because it's a playoff atmosphere here in Cincinnati, and it's very, very festival-like and well-deserved. Kudos to the Cincinnati Reds. Sweeping the Cubs got you the spot. Sweeping the Cubs got you the spot. And that's what I can come down to. We talk about them getting to this point. Nothing they did is really will wow you, but they're here. But when it comes to playing the Dodgers, I'll throw some numbers here at you. They were 33-1 against the teams that are in the playoffs, and 40-36 against teams with winning records. I won't go as far as saying they're going to win the series against the Dodgers because we know the Dodgers are a different animal. But this is not going to be, it's not the lock everyone's going to proclaim to be, because they're going to go out there with an experienced World Series winning manager of Terry Francona with nothing to lose, and they're going to have no pressure on them. No pressure on them. All the pressure's on the Dodgers for obvious reasons. No pressure on the Reds. They're going to be loose. They're going to be ready. Again, whether they can overtake them, I'm not going to make that prediction. I don't know. I'll be cheering them on like everyone here in Cincinnati will. But to quickly write them off going into this series, I think is a mistake. The Dodgers may win this series because they have the better talent. Hey, we talk about Ohtani. But to quickly write the Reds off, I wouldn't go that far. Terry Francona is going to have these boys ready to play. They got what they wanted to get in the postseason. Now they're here. They finally dodged that bullet. We'll see what happens from here. Their chances are better than you think. I won't go as far as saying they're going to win, but it's better than you think. It'll be a more competitive series than people are going to lead on to. I'll just go that far. I would like to come over here and say we shocked the world in LA. That it's our time in LA. I would like to do it. We'll see what it finds out. Won't be as easy as people think. They're going to have nothing to lose. Now, as far as the other team that got knocked out, the New York Mets, the below-average Juan Soto, they didn't pay you $765 million to hit in the double plays like it did twice yesterday in Miami. And, man, you were an embarrassment down the stretch. Keyword being embarrassment, the size of the national debt. That's how much of an embarrassment you were this entire season for the New York Mets. And now Peter Alonso's once out. Can't blame him. Of course, they're going to force him out because they have to pay somebody. They have to find a way to pay Juan Soto $765 million. I haven't seen a collapse quite like this for any team at any level. Because you're talking about a team that once had a 94% probability of getting that last playoff spot in the National League to going home. You got dog walked by Philadelphia, and you got embarrassed yesterday, only limiting yourself to 5 hits against the Miami Marlins, and I think you left like 8 or 9 on base. And I think 2 instances you had the bases loaded with 1 out. This is an embarrassing way for you guys to go out, and it's a thing of beauty because you made an investment to a mid-level player in Juan Soto in the tune of $765 million, and you got what you deserved. That's why Yankees fans were having the times of their lives when you were stupid enough to make that kind of an investment on a player who's basically mid at best and who basically embarrassed himself as the season wore on, and especially in the closing series against the Miami Marlins, and he was just abysmal. Twice he hit the double plays. Sorry, no one's paying $765 million for a mid-level player to hit in the double plays. I said back last summer when Juan Soto signed the contract, this is the Bobby Bonilla all over again. And that's what you guys have in New York when it comes to the Mets and Juan Soto, who's just a mid-level player. And you guys over there in Yankee Nation, you should be happy that guy took the money and left. And that's what it comes down to. Juan Soto took the money and left. You guys are in a better place without him. And the Mets are in a worse place with him. Because they were in the divisional series last season. They took the Dodgers to 6 games despite having given up every run of every single which way imaginable. But the Mets got exactly what they deserved. Karma came knocking on their door. Karma came knocking on the door of Juan Soto. And as a result, They got what they deserved. They can sit home. And we're going to the playoffs. Like it or not. Take it or leave it, New York. Yankees fans, you should be celebrating that. Because I told you the smartest thing you did was let that mid-level outfielder Juan Soto walk. And karma came knocking on the door of the New York Mets once again. I have an itch. The New York Mets fan base is going to let me have it because they did it to me earlier when I talked about the contract. Now it takes care of baseball. I said, I hope I can come out here and to say that the Reds will shock the Dodgers. I would like to do it. But one quick shout out real quick to the Cleveland Guardians. You're 16 games behind back in June to come all the way to win the American League Central. That's why you might just come out of the AL this season. Jose Ramirez is as good as anyone. And guess what? I mean, when you're rolling like that, momentum carries over. The Guardians have as much of a shot as anyone that in American League to come out of that league and win the pennant. They have a deep roster, nice pitching staff, good team. And when you come back from 16 games back the way they did, that momentum carries over. And I like their chances to come out of the American League. They deserve props for that. Now to the world of boxing. And the focus today will be on the middleweight division. Because one of the pure, in-your-face, break-your-bone, turn-your-face inside-out brawls took place 79 years ago at Yankee Stadium in New York City. This was the first meeting between Tony Zale and Rocky Graziano. Two face-first fighters who were there to just break bones and destroy you. That's what Zale and Graziano were all about. And when you get that kind of a fight, you're going to get a fight. And that's what happened here. Tony Zale, basically nicknamed the Man of Steel, came into the ring out of Gary, Indiana. Nicknamed from part of a steel town out there. That's why they called him the Man of Steel. Spent time in World War II and served in the military, facing the always tough, the durable Rocky Graziano. With a record with this fight with a record of 45-6-5, earned a status as a contender and a dangerous puncher. But the question was, can he hang with a guy like Tony Zale? When the fight started, the early knockdown by Zale looked like he's going to get an early knockout and wasn't control the opening round. But as the second round of the rounds came on, the determination of Rocky Graziano took over, got the knockdown on Zale, and battered, and I mean battered, Zale's face, turned him inside out. And looked like Graziano was going to win this fight, and it was close to being stopped because Graziano started to deliver a beating, and Zale had a broken right hand as a result. And he had this fight under control. Both fighters in a hellacious, vicious, face-first type pace where high energy and hard punching was going both ways. Cuts, swellings everywhere. And for a minute, it looked like Graziano was going to have this fight under control. But we fast forward to the sixth round, and despite the beating he took, the toughness of Tony Zale showed here as we go deep into the sixth round in front of 39,000 at Yankee Stadium with a broken right hand. He uses that right hand to the body as a rangefinder to set up the vicious left hook that put Rocky Graziano down and out. And in the 1946 fight of the year, and the first of their awesome three-fight in-your-face, batter-your-face-around type series, Tony Zale retains the middleweight championship by knocking out Rocky Graziano in a fight where you don't even recognize either fighter. I mean, both guys just beat each other up, and you want a pure one of those brawls you see on the streets. That's what Zale and Graziano had in the first of the epic trilogy. And this fight was a 1946 fight of the year. When you talk about Tony Zale and Rocky Graziano, I mean, parallel styles. I mean, they're both just absolutely awesome. I mean, Graziano had more marketability because of his profile, but Zale was more, the it guy at the time, was challenging a part of history. And they clashed in an epic 3-fight series, which was a 46, 47, and 48 fighters. Excuse me, the 1946, 1947, and 1948 fights of the year. Zale would win the first one. Graziano would come back and basically just did the same thing that Zale and would the second fight. But Zale would come back and another terrific fist in your face, turn your face inside out type brawl. Zale would beat Graziano to conclude that trilogy. We always say when it comes to trilogies, it's basically two guys who are made for one another. I can point to a whole lot of them. There's a historical one coming up in a couple of days. But when you talk about two fighters who are made for one another and we're willing to just lay it all out there, deliver the action, doesn't matter how they look after the fight, Tony Zale and Rocky Graziano deliver the goods. And the 1946 fight of the year, 79 years ago tonight at Yankee Stadium, after having his hand broken, his face turned inside out, Tony Zale sapped the momentum of Rocky Graziano with a perfectly placed left hook that sent Graziano down and out for the count to retain the middleweight championship of the world. And a terrific, terrific trilogy this was. This is before some of the other trilogies we know as today. And that's just how great Graziano Zale was. Two fighters who are willing to just let it go, mix it up. They didn't care about the how pretty they look after the fight. Just face first, turn your face inside out with just punches all over the place. That was the Zale-Graziano trilogy. And Tony Zale, after having his face turned inside out and having bones broken all over the place, found a way to starch Graziano 79 years ago and put him down and out for the count. Terrific trilogy between two tough middleweight fighters. And that's what those middleweights were back in the 40s. And we could fast forward to, in the middleweight division, about 3.5 decades later, we're going to London, England. This was a coming out party like none other. And we talk about beatings. One was administered, and deservedly so. It was Alan Minter defending the middleweight title against Marvin Hagler. This is before he was known as Marvelous Marvin. He was just known as Marvin Hagler. We know the racial taunts by Alan Minter leading up to this fight. And we know what happened to Marvin Hagler a year before this, when he was controversially robbed against Vito Antuofermo. The title went to Alan Minter, controversially, which was karma for Vito Antuofermo. But the build-up for this fight was just edgy. If they had the stuff today, this type of build-up today, Alan Minter would be burnt to the ashes. And Marvin Hagler, when he saw the build-up and saw the things that came out of Alan Minter's mouth, basically said to his face, "I'm going to make you pay for being stupid." And boy, did he. You know the kind of fight where you take a guy out to the corner of an alley and you bust out garbage can lids, a couple 2x4s, maybe a crowbar, a tire iron, maybe some brass knuckles, and just destroy the guy's face till he's bleeding a profuse of blood. That's the kind of beating Marvin Hagler just administered to Alan Minter, and it was well-deserved for the obvious reasons. I mean, from the start to the end of the third round, Alan Minter just had zero answers, and Marvin Hagler just let him have it. And he did not pull back, and nobody could blame him for the stuff that came out of Minter's mouth prior to this fight. And Marvin Hagler, after halfway through the third round, did enough damage to Minter's face to where no one recognized Alan Minter. And after doctor's instructions to have the fight stop, Marvin Hagler finally hit pay dirt to become the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. But the worst part came after the fight when fans and Minter's team littered the ring with debris, and Hagler had to be covered up by his management team, the Petronelli brothers, Pat and Goody, and British police had to escort them out of the ring to protect Marvin from any kind of further permanent hurt. That was the rage and buildup that was started by Alan Minter. And because that rage and buildup, he got what was coming, and Marvin Hagler did not pull back. Actually, the biggest lockout was a fight was stopped because Hagler was ready to do more to the guy, and nobody would have felt sorry for Minter given the stuff that came out of his mouth. Actually, Marvin Hagler said to his face, "I'll make you pay for saying it because you were just stupid." And Marvin Hagler was right. Maybe the fortune and misfortune was the fact that Marvin Hagler wasn't able to have his victory lap around the ring because of it, which happens with every champion. But the circumstances, we know what happened with it. But when you open your mouth the way Alan Minter did and say the things that he said, and you find a way to light a fire in a guy like Marvin Hagler, which is chronicled throughout Hagler's career, he had a chip on his shoulder. You can expect that. And that's what happened. It was the equivalent of take you upside the alley, bring some empty beer bottles, empty garbage can lids, 2x4s, and just bash you upside the head. That's the kind of beating Marvin Hagler delivered to Alan Minter 45 years ago at Wembley Stadium. I mean, the only thing that didn't happen was the beating didn't become worse because it was about to get there because Alan Minter shot his mouth and Marvin Hagler did not like it and took exception to it. And could you blame him? And Marvin Hagler was the middleweight champion of the world, and it was basically the end of Alan Minter. Many, many years later, they did meet at some place. I can't remember where. I want to say it's over in England because Hagler, after he retired, spent time overseas. They did manage to embrace, and Minter did apologize, which good on him, and Hagler accepted the forgiveness. But when you talk about how the fight was built up and what happened afterward, you can expect that to happen. And that's what happened. Alan Minter shot his mouth off stupidly. Marvin Hagler told him to his face, I'm going to make you pay for being stupid, and backed it up and just beat up Alan Minter to win the middleweight championship of the world. And we know about the reign of Hagler after that. And we talk about Marvin Hagler's reign as the middleweight champ and his place in middleweight history. Well, it's up there. Sugar Ray Robinson, Jake LaMotta, Carlos Monzon, just to name a few. Stanley Ketchel, Henry Greb, of course, the Toy Bulldog, Mickey Walker. Dick Tiger's up there. I mean, twice the world middleweight champion. Randolph Turpin. I mean, he's also up there. Lazo Papp, not more for his professional tenure, but more for his amateur, because one of the more decorated amateurs in that weight class way back when. Gene Fulmer, known for the tough 3-fight series with Dick Tiger. Carmen Basilio gave Sugar Ray Robinson all he could handle, among many others. Go more modern, a guy like Nigel Benn and Chris Eubanks Sr. from Europe. They're up. I mean, they're in that conversation. Right on the back end. Go further back, a guy like Charlie Burley. I mean, fought and won at middleweight and light heavyweight, but had a great run at middleweight. Nito Beneventi was a good one. And some other talented ones in the middleweight division, more modern, didn't pan out, but still worthy of talking about. Mike McCallum, Michael Nunn, Gerald McClellan. We know the unfortunate circumstance with him. He was treading in that right direction. Julian Jackson. Of course, who can forget what Ray Leonard did to Marvin Hagler to win the middleweight title? He's in that conversation. James Toney, Mike Gibbons, among many others. Of course, the two I mentioned earlier, Tony Zale and Rocky Graziano, with that 3-fight series where they just beat each other up and rearranged each other's face. Marvin Hagler is in that conversation of all-time great middleweights, rightfully so. That reign is stands along with some of the greats. And I conclude with a historical moment from here in Cincinnati. This one took place 75 years ago. We talk in a get the right place here. It's 75 years ago today in New York. It was Ezzard Charles, Cincinnati icon, finally getting his respect and his recognition by beating Joe Louis. You could probably argue this fight had no business taking place, just simply because Joe Louis should have been happy with his retirement, but because the IRS had a personal vendetta against Joe Louis, he was forced to come back. And while Louis was out, Ezzard Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott fought twice for the heavyweight title, with Charles winning those 2 fights. But no one accepted Charles as the heavyweight champ because the feeling was Joe Louis never lost his title in the ring. He would have to beat Joe Louis to get it back. And Ezzard Charles reluctantly didn't want to fight Joe Louis, given how much he admired him and he looked up to him, which was well chronicled at that time in various publications, especially here in Cincinnati. When you talk about this particular fight, it was a case of Joe Louis showing his age and Ezzard Charles just boxing his way to a unanimous decision. as the fight was getting on, Lewis showed his age, and Charles stepped it up, started to deliver a beating to Joe Louis, had him hurt a couple instances in the fight. But Charles said later on, he deserved the respect, so I let him go the distance. And that was what Ezzard Charles did to Joe Louis. We talk about what took place at Yankee Stadium. Ezzard Charles, the phrase, let me back up here. The greatest light heavyweight of all time, more than likely, even though he never got a chance to fight for a title. There are a lot of reasons for it. And like a lot of fighters in that time, where there were bigger names and bigger glamour names and bigger icons, if you want to call it that, we talk about a guy like Joe Louis. Ezzard Charles was a case of a guy who persevered and persevered and persevered, especially at his peak. And when he got to that level, he felt like he had more to prove. And even though he beat Jersey Joe Walcott twice, and he reluctantly didn't want to fight Joe Louis, went through with the fight knowing that for him to get public acceptance as the heavyweight champion of the world, that's a fight he needed, and that's why he took it. And we talk about the guys that hit that iconic status here in Cincinnati. I mean, especially here out there in the West Side, you know what he's all about. I mean, it's chronicled all over the place. And Ezzard Charles is a Cincinnati icon. And what he did to Joe Louis 75 years ago basically sealed it, because when you talk about getting a victory over the great Joe Louis, albeit under odd circumstances, it says a lot about you at the end of the day. That's what Ezzard Charles did. And we talk about his legacy here in Cincinnati. I mean, he's still being honored. They have some jazz fest over there outside Ezzard Charles Park, which it goes on every year. And they just changed one of the parks to Ezzard Charles Park. I was there earlier this summer. Nice honor for a guy who met community responsibility over here in Cincinnati, which none of the people today care about, but Ezzard Charles genuinely did. And that's why he stood out among many others. Reluctantly taking this fight because he admired Joe Louis, and it's all over the internet. You guys can read it. It's a wonderful story how much Ezzard Charles admired Joe Louis. He didn't want to go through with this fight. But deep down, knowing for him to have the distinction and the recognition of the legit heavyweight champion of the world, he had to get Joe Louis in the ring, and he took advantage of the opportunity, winning the unanimous decision. And Ezzard Charles, got, maybe this was his apex in his finest hour, because after that, I mean, he started his downturn, lost the title to Walcott. Of course, gave Marciano all he can handle in the two fights they had. And his place in history is secure. I mean, you could probably say the greatest light heavyweight of all time, and with some other names. Not the greatest peak as some of the others, but had a longer peak, and not far behind a guy like Billy Conn or even Archie Moore. But he probably gets a nod over Moore due to beating him 3 times. So that puts him over Moore. And because his peak wasn't far behind Billy Conn's, but longer, he probably gets the distinction of the greatest light heavyweight of all time. And to jump to heavyweight to beat Jersey Joe Walcott twice, and 75 years ago today, beat Joe Louis, etches his place in boxing history. And among some of the Cincinnati icons over here, Ezzard Charles, Oscar Robertson, Aaron Pryor, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, Anthony Munoz, Ken Anderson, Barry Larkin, and Luciano Lucho Acosta. That's the list of the Cincinnati icons. Nothing else is accepted. But Ezzard Charles etched his name in Cincinnati sports history and boxing history 75 years ago today by finally earning the recognition of heavyweight champion of the world when he beat Joe Louis by unanimous decision. Wonderful, wonderful stories. And for those of you here in the Cincinnati area, I encourage you to check out all the stuff they have on Ezzard Charles on that side. The street, obviously, the mural, which is about a mile long and about a half mile high, the park right across the street from it. And they're still honoring him with all kinds of stuff over there. That should tell you the legacy of Ezzard Charles. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sir Hunt on X. I will be back tomorrow night. Wednesday night is what I would call my super show. We're going to go back in time to a global event that just captivated the souls of every human being in this world that took place in another country. It closed out probably an iconic run in boxing history. I think some of you guys could figure that one out. But Wednesday, a whole show, a whole hour devoted to that night. If you missed any part of tonight's show, you can always catch the uploaded audio versions on the Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio apps, and the video version on the Spotify app. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in life. You take care of yourself first, all the good things will come your way. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Focus on you. Take care of you. That's all that matters at the end of the day. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. Enjoy the rest of the 29th of September, 2025. And I will see you tomorrow.